But I want to focus in on a mini topic from chapter 12. So tell me if any of this sounds familiar to you. You never remember to take out the trash. How could you forget? Well, can't you help out around here? Why am I not important to you? Why don't you love me anymore? Any of that sound familiar? Hopefully not, but maybe it does sound a little vaguely familiar to me, right? The words change, but the sentiment is the same, right? I want to talk today about God's plan for getting our needs met, okay? And the entire chapter of Victory of the Darkness 12 talked about rejection. And so this is just a tiny piece of that chapter because, you know, when we're talking about I have needs, and I'd like you to help me meet these needs, that is a huge source of rejection. Or maybe we think it's a bigger source of rejection than it really is, or really could be, right? But we all have these needs. And the thing about needs is, right, you need your needs. Right? 3 basic needs we have. It was in the book. I'll just flash it up on the screen. To be loved, to be accepted, and to be affirmed. Right? Those are needs. We want those to be met. And we face a lot of rejection or possible rejection when we open ourselves up and we say, hey, honey, can you help me to feel loved? Can you help me to feel accepted? Can you help me to be affirmed? Right? And so I want to just break some of the lies today and just kind of open that up just a little bit. Because the challenge for most of us is that we're never taught how to express our needs and how to get our needs met. Right? We're never taught that. And for the most part, we had bad examples growing up. Okay, so I come from a divorced family. So my parents divorced at the age when I was 7, and my brother was like 1 or 2. And so I grew up in this environment where nobody knew how to communicate like, hey, I have a need. Can you help me? Right? And so it was more what I started off with, the yelling and the complaining, like complaining, right? And what you're really saying is, hey, you know, I'm hurting and I have needs. But we have trouble expressing that because we've never had a good role model. Right? And so we go into that complaining stage. Or if you're more like my personality, you are the withdrawing personality. So you get quiet and you don't say anything. The problem with that one is if you're quiet, nobody knows you have needs. Right? Nobody knows you need anything because you're just quiet. And actually, you know, for a lot of us, silence is a virtue. So we think, oh, if you're quiet, there's no problem. Right? And so, but really, you're trying to communicate you have a need by being quiet and, mixed results, right? And then you get more frustrated, and then eventually you blow up and you become the complaining type because you just can't take it anymore, right? And so it's a real challenge with us because, at least for me, growing up in my family and not knowing how to communicate, I need, and I still need, and I'm really preaching to myself today because I really need this message. I need to know how to communicate and how to have my needs met, right? So there's a third style of communication, right? We can complain, we can be silent, but there's a third style that I want to suggest to you that works better. It's an I message, okay? And I'm not talking about texting with your iPhone. I'm talking about a statement that begins with I, right? And Pastor John's talked about this before, if I remember correctly, right? And so an I message is just something like, hey, I need some help. Hey, I don't feel loved anymore. Something's wrong, right? I miss it when we don't communicate regularly, okay? And these I messages are great because they're bringing down the level of judgment, right? Because as soon as you use a you statement and you start to say, hey, you never, Or, right, that's bringing up the level of judgment, right? And, I know how we can reinterpret things, and we can still read into an I message. We can still read into some judgment in that. But really, it brings down the level of judgment to say, hey, I need something. And of course, your tone of voice and your body language communicates a lot too, right? But okay, read the book. He goes into a lot more depth in that topic. But this is all well and good. But our fear is that if we put ourselves out there, and if we say, hey, I really don't feel loved right now. If we put ourselves out there, what's the fear? The fear is rejection. The fear is that your spouse is going to say, so? I don't feel loved, right? And it's just going to be this clash, and you're just going to feel rejection. So, and if you're going to be rejected, why even say anything? Why even bother, right? But that's the biggest lie that the enemy uses against us, right? Because the lie is that if I share my need and my spouse or my friend doesn't reciprocate, they don't respond the way that I want them to, I'm just going to be rejected, right? And I'm going to be even more hurt. You know what? That's a lie, right? We're already hurting. We're already hurting, and by trying to communicate, you're trying to get that meanness, right? The truth is, when we do share our needs and we open up in a positive, non-judgmental way, we open up an opportunity for them to minister to us, right? Have you ever thought about it that way? I never thought about it this way until I read that book. But when we share our needs, we're giving the other person an opportunity to minister to us, to serve us, to love us, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the truth. That's the truth of the Christian life, right? So let me ask you this question. So when I think about you guys, everybody here in this church, I know that this is an incredibly generous church. Incredibly generous. Your hearts are just like huge, right? And I know that any one of you, when you hear about a need, your first response is to meet it. How can I help? What can I do? Right? That is your first response. And hopefully it's my first response too. Right? And so a few months back, I have two employees, right? Two people on my team. My gym manager, her brother was in a plane crash. Right? He's a flight instructor. He flies, teaches people how to fly these small little planes. So 4 of them were in this plane crash. And from all the stories that I've heard, he crashed the plane in such a way that it was the best crash you could have, right? And he saved those other 2 of the 3 people in that crash. One of them did pass away due to injuries, but he saved the other 2. And you can imagine in a plane crash, no one gets out unscathed, right? So he had 3rd-degree burns over his entire body, and just it's taken months and months and months of surgery just to get him back, right? And when you hear that, they started a GoFundMe campaign, and just like that, within a week or 2, they'd raised over $100,000 for him, right? And of course we supported that, and the hospital bills are incredible, so they've done a couple of other fundraisers. But when you hear a story like that, you just, I know y'all. Your heart just goes, oh, how can I help? Does he still need, some money for the hospital bills? Because I want to help, right? Because that's who we are, right? But you understand my point. My point is that when you hear a need, your reaction, your instinct is to meet it. Right? That's all of us. Our reaction is to meet it. And that's why the lie of the enemy is that if you share your need with your spouse, they're just going to reject you. They're just going to put you down again. Right? And so I don't know all of your situations, but if you're struggling with that, pray about it. Pray about it. And see if you can't take the first step. All right. Here's a Bible verse. It talks about this, and I think this embodies each and every one of you. It's Philippians 2, 3, and 4. It says this: do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. So Philippians 2, this is the great Bible passage. It's about Jesus, and I didn't put all of those verses up there, but this is about a great mystery in the Bible. But Jesus, God, becoming a man and giving up everything related to God, all his power, all of his status, becoming a man and serving us to the point that he was willing to die, right? And so that is this passage of Philippians 2, and it's an amazing look at the humility of Jesus, right? Let's read that again. Peter, can you go back one slide? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, like Jesus, value others above yourself. Next verse. Not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others, right? And I just feel like this embodies each and every one of us. So I just want to empower you with some tools, because we all have needs, and sometimes we have trouble expressing those needs, right? But because we all have this heart, we all want to meet needs. We all want to be helpful. We all want to serve one another. And because that's in each of our hearts, I just want to challenge you. Just be willing to be vulnerable and be open and put your needs out there. Because anyone here would give you the shirt off of their backs, right? And I believe, see, when you hear, this is the big thing about victory over the darkness is, how do we become more like Christ? How do we become more like Christ? That's the goal of the Christian life, is to become like Jesus Christ, right? And in fact, the word Christian means like a little Christ, right? So when we call ourselves Christians, we're saying, I want to be a little Christ. I want to be like Christ, right? But more than just, I think that this applies to not just us Christians, people in the church. I think this applies to everyone, because in my opinion, humanity was made to meet one another's needs. Okay? And that's why you can go out there and you can see non-Christian couples, and they can have great relationships because they just know how to serve each other. They know how to communicate with one another. They know how to meet one another's needs, right? And you see examples out there of non-Christians doing that. You see examples of Christians doing that great as well, right? But this is just something that I think is built into our humanity, that we see a need and we want to meet it, right? And I think it's humanity at our finest. But it's always a choice, right? It's always a choice. Will we meet a need, or will we just be selfish and just be concerned about ourselves, right? And so I want to show you a quick video. This is like a 1-minute video about the choice. You like that? Peter, you're going to have to stop it because it just loops over and over again. You like that? You know why I show videos? Because I'm not in touch with my emotions. My personality is not the feeling type. I'm like the thinking type. So when you see a good video, what you feel is that emotion, right? That emotion of being selfish. Like have you heard of this parable before? Have you heard of this parable about the spoons that are too long and you can't feed yourself? And so I love it because you can see the emotion. Like they're trying to meet their own need, right? They're trying to feed themselves, and it's like, I can't do it. And then they start to argue, right? And that's the vicious cycle when you just are selfish and you're only thinking about yourself and you're only trying to get. And then somebody takes a step of faith and they serve someone else. And then it begins to be contagious, right? And in any relationship, I think that's how it works. One of us has to be the bigger person, the better person, the one to take the first step of faith. And I love the emotion of that video because it's like, it captures it perfectly. Like when you're just selfish, oh, it's hard. And you're alone, and everything's in black and white, right? But when you start to serve, things change, right? So with that feeling in your heart, I want you to check out the second passage from Acts chapter 4. This is what the early church did. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. Okay, next verse, we're just going to go through all of them. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and God's grace was so powerfully at work in all of them that there were no needy persons among them. Can you imagine that? No needy persons. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the feet of the apostles, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. You know, and so these financial examples are kind of the easiest examples to talk about, but you can make the leap to how meeting an emotional need is the same, right? But I just love this picture of the early church. And, you know, when you read those first few chapters of the book of Acts, you're reading about the church and how it's been just growing and expanding, right? And, of course, the resurrection of Jesus helps, right? Being in that environment where you can say, hey, remember that Jesus guy? He was here a year ago, and now he died, and now he's raised again. Just in that environment where everybody knew, you know, not everybody, but a lot of people knew who Jesus was and what had happened, and this whole story of the resurrection, this whole thing, right? In that environment, it was just electric that people were sharing about Jesus, right? But more than just talking about a faith and more than just talking, they did something. They had a community where they just shared everything, right? And in this community, you can see from this from that passage, verse 33, right? So everybody's sharing their possessions, and it's just this generous community, just like we have here, this generous community. And they're not just being generous with the church, they're being generous with everyone. And with great power, the apostles continued to testify about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them that there were no needy persons among them, right? And so there's this practical aspect of the gospel. The gospel is not just like a spiritual, emotional kind of thing. It's a very tangible thing, right? And so Pastor John is always encouraging us, right? How do you go out there? How do you reach the world? How do you share your faith? Real simple. You just find the need. Find the need and you fill it. You find the need and you fill it. You find the need and you fill it. And that opens the door to a conversation about the gospel, to the conversation about your faith, right? And so I love this story because it just encapsulates so many things. But what I want you to see is I want you to see the power of sharing your needs and having your needs met. And then when you're good, you're ready to meet the needs of other people. You're ready to just go out there and find your coworkers, your friends, and meet their needs too, right? I really believe that we were made to meet each other's needs, not just take care of our own. Right? And I'm proud to be a part of this church, right? And I was just thinking back over my brief history here, but you remember, I don't know, this is like a year and a half ago, Logan Sagapolutele, she was able to go on this trip, right? And she needed to raise all this money because it was an expensive trip. And we supported her fundraisers and we gave her donations and we did all these things. And that was us. That was our church, right? Because she had this opportunity, and we're like, oh, yeah, we want you to go to that thing. I can't even remember what it was for, but that's my feeble memory, right? But she had a great opportunity, and we're like, as a community, we said, oh, yeah, we want to support you. We pray for her, and we supported her fundraisers, and wow, that was great. Our missionary friends in Ireland, they needed a van. I don't know, this is a year or two ago also. They needed a van, and so we prayed for them, and we sent some money, and they were able to get a van, right? And that's why I love this church, right? You see, there's a lot of little kids running around this church, right? And every time one of the moms gives birth, there is a truckload of food that shows up at your doorstep, right? Like every day somebody's bringing you some more food. And that's the generous church, right? That's us. That's the heart. Why? Because we see a need and we just move to fill it, right? We see a way that we can support one another, and we just move, right? And so I just want to encourage you guys, we are that people, right? And we just have to remember that, yeah, that's who we are. We're a generous people. We can meet our spouse's needs like this. We can meet our kids' needs like this. We can meet the needs of the world in the same way, right? And so I just want to challenge you. Can you imagine if we just all adopted that mindset? Like, how can I find a need and fill it? How can I find a need and fill it? I want to, because if you're like me, I want to share my faith with people at work and people I interact with, but how can I do that? How can I do that? I feel stumped sometimes. I don't know how to start, right? Start here. Just find the need and fill it. Find the need and fill it. And eventually that will open up the conversation. Hey, why are you so nice to me? Well, why do you keep helping me out? Well, besides the fact that I like you, I'm a Christian, and I believe that this is what we do. We meet needs. And I believe the best of humanity is that too. We find needs and we meet it, right? And hopefully, my example is that I, as a Christian, am the best of humanity. Can you imagine if we all just found one or two people and we started meeting those needs? Can you imagine what we could do? This one small thing, meeting needs, this one small thing can change the world, right? People are trying to change the world by sharing food, right? That video was mostly about an organization trying to distribute food around the world, because we have enough food to feed the whole world if we would just share it and distribute it, right? And I'm not socialist in any form of it, in any way, shape, or form, but I really believe that this one thing could change the world. We just find the need and we fill it, and then we let God take over. All right, would you pray with me? Father, I just thank you for this quick thought, Father, from coming out of our book, Victory Over the Darkness. And Lord, I just thank you that, God, this one thing, God, and it seems so small and so easy. God, this one thing can change the world. And so, Father, I pray with all the generous hearts in this place, God, I pray, Father, that you would empower us to love our spouses, to love our kids. And God, empower us to get over the fear of rejection, and just be willing to take a step and share some of the needs that we have with our spouses, with our friends. And God, I thank you that every time we share a need, we open up a ministry opportunity. We share our need. We open up a ministry opportunity so that we can meet one another's needs. And God, that one thing can change the world. So I pray, Father, that you would change the world through each and every one of us, God, as we change the world for one person or two people in this next year. Thank you for this, God. Thank you for the early church and their amazing, amazing generosity. I thank you that this church, too, is amazingly generous. So I praise you and thank you, Lord, for all this in Jesus' name. Amen.